So here we are on a completely non-regularly scheduled recording time.
Yep, no schedule.
Well, you say that. I wish I had the audio of our last recording session where you said to me, what if we record every second Tuesday now? Because as you said at the time,
No, don't.
You've never heard me so happy, right? Like it was kind of like a moment where it was like almost unbelievable to me to hear you suggest that we set a time on our calendar that we could, as I think I said at the time, put a repeating rule on.
I mean, yes, you did sound like the happiest boy in the world, and you were so happy. I found it surprising and not really quite what I was expecting because
if I know, because the thing, if I know when we're recording, I know when the show's coming out, and I can answer questions that I get and deal with administrative stuff that I need to deal with without either A, just randomly guessing, or B, needing to pin you down for a minute to ask you, right? So like knowing is great, but nevertheless, our schedule was immediately broken the first time. We didn't even get to one of these scheduled recordings.
Well, I mean, yeah, you are correct. That I was trying to do is solve the problem of let's have something like here, Myke. Let me describe to you what the advantage of schedules are.
Please, I need to know. It's so useful.
It occurred to me that numerous times over the past many years is like, oh, it might be useful to have like a default recording day. That is the thing is really what I was thinking of is let's have a day that if we don't say anything,
we just know
is the day that is the recording day. That's what I was aiming for.
And that is the real genuine like relief for me of knowing roughly when I can plan to, because there are times, many times, where we'll have a date that we were going to do and we move it for some reason, like we did this one. And then the day before, I'm like, is he remembered? Because
you're not wrong.
History
you're not wrong to wonder.
has proven that there are many times where we had a day, we moved a day because you've got something happening, and then you forget.
Yeah, I think you have also developed a pretty good radar for when is Gray very busy with some self-contained project.
Yeah.
And so like when is he extremely likely to have completely forgotten that the outside world exists? Like I think you've gotten a good sense for that over the years. So you're not wrong.
Like honestly, the last couple of weeks have been like a real good, like from the time before you put out the Gray Was Wrong video to now, like I can sense when you're off the radar a little bit, right? And at that time it's like fine. Like I know if something's urgent, I can flag you down, but otherwise I'm just gonna like batch up my questions and we'll deal with them later on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so when that happens, I know that there is a strong likelihood that if I can tell that you're still in that mode, I need to like really triple confirm with you that you know we're recording.
Yes. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. But yeah, so I was just been trying to do a bunch of much more longer term planning and just thinking things through. And I was like, oh, hey, what I would like for Cortex is just some, like you said it exactly correctly. I was trying to think, I want a repeating rule for this that can just be the default if we don't say anything else. But then you are correct that we agreed on that, and probably not, but 2 days later, like my whole life exploded. And I was like, well, I'm going to be shockingly busy until this thing is done. So it didn't even occur to me when I was like, we got to move back that Cortex recording date. Like, this isn't happening. And I think the first thing you said to me is like, oh, you've already broken the schedule that you promised me.
We didn't get
instantly.
To one. We didn't even get to one.
I'm so sorry, Myke.
But look, I had notice. All I ever want is notice. You just mentioned something. Like I want to come back to the scheduling thing a little bit, because like you are doing some interesting stuff with scheduling at the moment in your life, which is very fascinating to me. You just put up a video called Weekend Wednesday. Like you have not only you've completely upended what a week looks like. So yes, you are doing some interesting things.
Well, you're also breaking the timeline here, Myke, because I haven't put it up yet. We're recording before it goes up.
I know, but we've specifically said we're going to wait. Although you've made that promise that you've made to me again 1,000,000 times where it's, I have a video that's coming out.
Right.
It's definitely coming out Tuesday.
Yeah, no, 100% it's coming out Tuesday, Myke.
I believe that you believe it.
Right.
Right? But which is why when I just had to tell someone when the episode was coming out, I said most likely Wednesday.
Right.
Because it could be Thursday, because the video might come out on Tuesday, because that's also like a thing that's happened many times. And I'm not criticizing, right? Like, but all I'm trying to prove in this discussion here is we're a good team because I know how you work, right?
It's very kind of you. Yes, that's excellent.
I mean, but it's, like,
yeah.
People work in different ways. Like, Cortex is a thing that you do, but you have a much more time-consuming thing that you do. Podcasts are the thing that I do. Like, there's like it's all different, right? Like,
yeah,
it could easily be the other way around, but it's not. Like, this is just the way that it is, and I'm more flexible in my schedule than yours can be because there are like much more dependencies. So, like, anyway. But there was something you mentioned around, you were saying about like looking at your schedule and thinking about things. It pointed to something that I've been acutely aware of right now and that I'm referring to as being pandemic busy.
Okay.
That I think is could become a real problem.
What do you mean by pandemic busy?
Right. So I think a lot of people right now, because their lives have changed so much, they have like different demands on their time. They're using their time in different ways. That people are starting to fill this time with stuff. Maybe they have a new project that they want to work on, a side project, or they are taking on more responsibilities in their life in some way, whether it's with work or like different family responsibilities or social responsibilities. That I'm worried that when life returns to normal, people are going to be really overwhelmed because they've taken on so many things during the pandemic that their normal lives would not allow them to do. And I'm worried that like this is going to become a problem for people afterwards. Like, I'm also really worried about the ergonomics concern that I have about people. Which is that like people working from home now, we spoke about this before, not considering their ergonomics, think that they're totally fine because it didn't start hurting immediately, but it doesn't. It takes months to like, so like I feel like now we're in like the points, like 6 months, right? Now we're in the time when people's bodies are going to start breaking if they weren't paying attention. Yeah, that's like a whole other thing. But this is this new thing that I'm worried about.
That's a good point. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of really wonky home office setups where you're like, oh yeah, this stool and this card table is perfectly acceptable for me to work on, and then 6 months later, you're like, why is my back hurt so much?
Exactly. Or like, oh, I can just like stare down at my laptop the whole time. I don't need to elevate and get an external keyboard. Like, that's not something I need. It's like, no, that's something you definitely need.
Okay, so pandemic busy. What I thought you meant by this is like, oh, people are just filling up their time with make work, because they've got nothing to do. But so it's actually a good point. So I forget what's that rule, like, work expands to fill the time that you have or something. Like, it feels like this is a variation on people always have a certain number of projects or obligations in their life. And so like you think people are filling back up to whatever their personal level of like, this is the optimal number of projects that I want to work on. They're filling up to whatever that is without considering the fact that they're going to need a lot more slack in the system if real life returns back and comes in with like, oh, hey, remember commutes? Remember all the office stuff that you have to deal with? Remember social obligations? So that's what you're concerned about, is like people are loading up and it's going to be like system shock later. It's a really interesting point. That's a really interesting point.
This goes into my personal theory, which like where I am right now in my life is believing things will go back to normal, but it's going to be a long time, right? Like that's where I am right now, right? Where it's like, I believe there will be a restored sense of normality in our future, but it's still a way away. Like it's still at least a year away, right? Like that's kind of where I am right now. And, like we can argue the specifics, but basically the idea of like, we don't think about lockdowns anymore, right? It's like a thing in our lives. And, like we start thinking about like, oh, we should work in offices. Now, there is a whole other question, which I do want to get into more at some point in the future, where I believe that office work is just going to change because of the economics of it, not because of the disease, right? Not because of the virus, right? So like, there's a lot of companies now that are like, holy shit, we're saving millions.
Right.
Why the hell do we have these offices, right? And so, like, I don't believe all corporate real estate will go away, but I think significant chunks of it will. Because there are always jobs that people work better in person, or there are always situations where, like, there are people that can't work comfortably at home. It's not easy for them. Like, they don't like it, and it's good to have options. But I can imagine a situation where lots of big companies have maybe 50% of the office space that they had before. So like that's like a thing that I think there will be changes, but the idea of like the way people live their lives, like I think it will return to a sense of normality, but we're still a way away from it, which is why this thing is concerning to me, of like we've still got a long time to go. People don't want to be bored. People don't want to be sitting around doing nothing. And or people see this as a time of like, look at this extra time I have. I have this project that I've always wanted to do. I've now saved 2 hours of my day every single day through not needing to commute. I can finally do that thing. And then they get used to that thing being in their life. And then they need those 2 hours back. Like, it's just like and this isn't me saying like, don't do the thing, right? Because obviously we care like deeply on this show about people having projects, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's something that we need to keep in mind. It started for me because for many reasons, some that we'll go into during this episode, I am in a very busy time right now. And it's just been a thing where I've thought, I feel busy again. Why? And so like I've come to the conclusion that the stuff that I'm working on is short term, and I would have just felt more busy than I currently do. But it's about I'm trying to not fall into the trap of I have a bit of extra time free. It's time to start a new podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, at least from what I know about your upcoming schedule, it does strike me that like, oh yes, this is just a busy time, as there are busy times. So you don't think that there's anything in your personal life right now that you would identify as like, oh no, this is a pandemic busy project?
No.
Okay.
There's like some social things have changed, but I think that they will just get replaced. But it's just a case of like looking around at the people in my life and looking at people like I see online and stuff, and it's like, it's just been like a little, it's like this term that's just been bubbling around in my brain a little bit that I think I want to return to at some point in the future, but I wanted to like float it by you to see if it like held. I keep hearing people say like, oh, because of the pandemic, I'm like trying out this new hobby or whatever, which is awesome. Great use of your time. But my concern is that there will then be a sense of overwhelm later.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I'm just sort of mentally filing through all the like the cards in my head for the projects and things. Like I don't feel like there's anything for me that really sticks out as that, but the idea still feels pretty valid though. Like, oh, this is totally going to be a thing. Because
so like you were saying in that, I think it was in your Q&A video that you just put up / are going to put up.
Will put up.
That you had a bunch of stuff on your calendar, right? Which obviously got cleared off. But it's not like you're now not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? So you are filling it with other things. And then it's just a question of, is this the less or more? Or could I potentially go through this time and have come up with a really great idea that later on means way more work when I can go back to doing those projects again?
No, I mean, part of why I originally suggested like, oh, let's have a default Cortex recording day, even if it gets moved. And talking about projects is, I was aware suddenly of, oh, I need to really seriously sit down and plan and think about the order of a bunch of things that I was thinking I was going to work on. Like we've been long enough that I've recognized, oh, a bunch of these projects, they're not temporarily on hold and I'll get to them in a month. It's more like, okay, assume these projects simply cannot be done or cannot be finished. And if that's the case, you need to rethink in a really vague way, what does the rest of the year of videos look like? Like, which topics are you going to do, or that kind of thing. So that's why I was in like a scheduling mood and thinking about it. It doesn't strike me as pandemic busy, because this is always a thing that I do. Again, I don't even, this is not like any target that I try to stick to. It's just the vague concept of what are the next 4 to 6 most probable main videos that are coming up. It's just like a useful thing to think about.
But you could see, I guess, if somebody thought like you a little, like enough, so someone worked like you enough, like that they could be planning out their next 6 videos, and then the travel starts again. So the 4 projects that they were working on before are now also in the hopper.
Yes, exactly. The only thing that makes it different for me is that because of the way I structure my whole life, I'm able to then just push back and like rearrange all of those projects. But yes, like most people in most working situations, projects come with more clear and direct external dependencies and obligations. And so, yes, I can totally see that you can very easily work yourself into way too many obligations that like just cannot possibly fit into a normal person's life once a normal person's life returns. So yeah, I think it's a really valid concept. And I think you're right to, I don't know, maybe this feels like the real danger zone time for this, of people having pandemic projects and taking on more like right now, and then also, you know, real life returning maybe at some point on the horizon. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Because I don't know about you, but like, I feel like this is life now.
Yeah, I do.
Like, I feel like I've adapted.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that I'm taking my eye off the ball. What it means is, like, we have our flow now, right? Like, we know how we operate in life. And so I think it's the time, it could, for a lot of people, where they were like, all right, this is what I'm used to for now. So what changes, right? Like, maybe people are spending, like, time reassessing. I like your Weekend Wednesday idea, by the way. I wished it was something that I could easily implement, but I have a lot of like scheduled projects on Wednesdays.
Right, yeah.
Then I don't need to move. But similarly, though, I do always try to keep Thursday or Friday in a week pretty open, so I can have a backup weekend day. That happened this very week. So I kept pretty much most of yesterday free because we were working today.
Right.
Which is a Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, the Weekend Wednesday thing for me is directly related to quarantine. And the evolution of the thought starts with a conversation you and I had at the very beginning of this whole thing, where you were talking about taking the weekend really seriously. This was part of the whole, like, what day is it? What month is it? I have no idea, right? You lose sense of time. Do I need a giant sign in my house that says Saturday, right? Yeah. I thought that was a really good point about take the weekends seriously. This is now a vital thing. And it's also something I think just generally over the past many years of my working in my life, I've never really taken the weekends seriously. You know, this is always the problem of being a self-employed person is, you know, you can just very easily end up always working or half working, which is even worse. So I was like, oh yeah, you're 100% right. Like, keeping psychological distance between days on and days off is 1,000 times more important now, in the same way that like exercise is mandatory. It doesn't matter what you think about it. Like, you have to do this now. But it started this thought process because I've always, like, whoever came up with the 7-day week is the worst number. The 7-day week is like incredibly frustrating. It's a prime number. It doesn't divide easily. I don't like it. 2 thumbs down to the inventor of the 7-day week. I found myself like taking the weekend seriously, but getting increasingly annoyed by the amount of time is just wrong. And I've tried to come up with various schemes for, could I have a 12-day week that overlaps with the 7-day week?
You see, this is the thing that you are not allowed to keep doing. Well, I'll just change time. I'll live on a different time zone. Like, you can't just keep trying to do these things.
What do you mean?
I live on a different time zone, and my week lasts 12 and a half days.
Well, okay, but so here's, you know, The problem is that the external world exists,
Yes.
right? And so you can have these great patterns where you have some very old calendars do this kind of thing where it's like, oh, we have 3 cycles. There's a 3-day cycle and a 9-day cycle and a 12-day cycle. And like different combinations of the cycles mean different things. And it's like, oh, look at this. Like, I think you could actually design something that works pretty well, like for actual human times. It was like, but guess what? 7's a prime number, so you, right? Like nothing you can possibly invent is ever going to line up with the 7-day schedule on any kind of scale. You know, it's just like, it just mathematically doesn't work no matter how much you try. Although I've tried many times, right, to somehow defeat prime numbers. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, so while I was taking the weekend really seriously, I just kept thinking that everything about this traditional work week doesn't work, but is there something that I can fix? And for me, at least, realizing that I find I rarely really need the 2 days in a row off, and that the 2 days off are sort of, they're ineffective being back to back. And so I thought, okay, weekend Wednesday is going to be a weekend day, and I'm going to take that work day and put it on Saturday so that I have 2 days of work, 1 day off, 3 days of work, 1 day off, and just repeat that cycle over and over again. And I have to say, I've been doing it basically the whole quarantine, and I love it. Like, I find it is perfect as much as can be done within the constraints of a 7-day week. This little pattern, I think, is about as optimal, at least for me, as I can possibly make it. And so, yeah, that's why I made like this little light gray video where I want to like propagandize this concept. And like, obviously, this is not going to work for 99.9% of people on the planet. But I think there are enough people who, if they're able to have some control over their schedule, might benefit from trying something like this out. You know, because again, there's not an infinite number of different types of people. I think this could really work for some self-employed people or for some students. And yeah, I've just absolutely loved this new schedule. And I think this is going to last for the rest of my life, I suspect. Well beyond quarantine, at least.
So what day did you removed Saturday, right?
Yeah, so Saturday is a work day.
Right, okay.
That's what happened.
I think the thing that I liked about it the most, which is a very good point, of like, if you work Saturday, that is like a day when you can put in things where you don't want to be disrupted.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is working, so they'll leave you alone.
Yeah. And I mean, a little bit of this comes out from back when I was being a teacher. Like, you have these days where you're supposed to put in like a certain amount of time before the school year starts up. And I would always try to strategize about like, I want to go in on the days when no one else is there, and you can get 10,000 times more done when no one else is around. And I also find like even for me, it's been useful to have a day where it's just like the possibility of the outside world interrupting you is much lower, like with work related stuff, if you make Saturday a work day. And yeah, it's been really, really great. And I find that this cycle feels just about right. I don't have the feeling like I did when I was taking the weekend seriously, but still doing 5 days in a row of like real work, of feeling like Thursday afternoon to Friday felt like really unoptimal time. Like, I'm still working, but I'm working at a lower percent efficiency than otherwise. And so I think like having a weekend Wednesday day as a break day really feels like it keeps the efficiency up much higher for all of the other work days. Although, again, because I haven't actually put that video up yet and we're recording ahead of time, this is one of those videos that like I'm a little worried about, like, how is this going to be received? Like, I don't know if everybody's going to totally hate this.
Look at you. You can change your work week.
Yeah, this is totally a like, well, that's great for CGP Grey, you know. You know, obviously, there's no big company in the world that would ever do it because too many people would hate it. But again, I'm thinking of, you know, some of the teams of people that I know, you know, like in YouTube and education land where they're like small teams of people. I could totally see a small team of people trying it out and thinking like, oh, this actually works.
Flexible time exists.
Yeah, flexible time exists.
It's a thing that lots of companies do.
Yeah. And even the people that I work with are very happy to have some concept of like, when is he around, when is he not around,
Yeah.
like, so even here, like, I don't enforce a schedule on anybody, but just knowing like what days is Gray working or what days is Gray not working, even within like with that, or even within my own like personal life, just with my family, I'm surprised at how everybody is thrilled to know like what days is he on and what days is he off.
Yeah, imagine if it was possible to like share a bit of a schedule with people.
What are you trying to
It
get
can
at,
make
Myke?
them happier. Collaborate and work with
I don't.
you, you know?
What are you trying to get at here? I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
Structure, Gray, like people love it. This episode of Cortex is brought to you by SetApp. There's an app for everything these days. Some are excellent, some not so much. There's too many apps out there to choose from, right? Well, a great way to discover new and quality apps while getting all the tools that you need to be successful and productive is by using SetApp, a subscription for Mac apps. SetApp packs over 190 high-quality apps into one, and there's an app for almost any task so you can stay in your flow and finish what you started. SetApp also now allows you to take your projects to your iPhones and iPads with support for iOS companion apps from your Mac favorites like Ulysses, To Do, and Taskheat. SetApp has a dedicated curation team that only selects the highest quality applications, which means that you don't have to spend tons of time searching for the best tools. And it's really great value too. Instead of paying thousands of dollars for tons of app licenses, you just pay one flat monthly fee. New apps are added regularly, updates are free, and all of these applications are their full-featured pro versions. Head over to setapp.com to try SetApp free for a week. If you like it, just pay $9.99 per month for as long as it's useful to you. And it will be. Once again, go to setapp.com, that's SETAPP.com, to see how it fits in with your workflow. Our thanks to SetApp for their support of this show and all of Relay FM. CortexMerch.com.
CortexMerch.com.
We have a limited quantity available now of what I'm referring to in my mind as the doomed reprint of the Theme System Journal.
Oh, it's very serious sounding.
Well, this order was placed in November?
Oh God. What? No, that can't be true. That cannot be true.
Well, I had the order in before Lunar New Year.
Ugh.
That was the goal. I put this order in, I believe, at the end of 2019.
Ugh. Did 2019 even happen? Was 2019 real? Like, it feels so long ago. Okay.
It's like at that point, I really couldn't remember what year was last year. Like, I really could not remember that.
Right.
So I put this order in either maybe like December or maybe January of this year. But the idea was to beat Lunar New Year.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody that doesn't remember, coronavirus hit in China
Mm-hmm.
during Lunar New Year. Like that was when it spread.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was people coming together, and that was that, right? So it is kind of like when I look back on it now with hindsight, it's like not a funny haha, but like a funny thing. Like I was very more aware of coronavirus than most people because our notebooks were delayed.
Right.
But I never thought, right? Like nobody did. I never thought that this would happen, I have no concept of it. Of something like this. It was just like, oh, maybe it'll be like swine flu, I guess. No. Anyway, so this reprint is the order that has been in the works for the best part of 8 months. And the other thing is like I cannot find the energy to actually talk about all of this, but like it wasn't just this. There were also like multiple issues with this reprint. This was the one where, Gray, you may remember this, where I think I told you about it. I don't know if I've told this story on the show, where I was sent a box of samples, of 50 samples, and only 3 arrived.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then 2 days later, the rest arrived because the box was damaged. But it's like, this entire reprint has been a comedy of errors, but they are available now. You can go to cortexmerch.com. We still have a small amount left. So if you do want one, get one. And I will say, just like we are working on the second edition, this will most likely be the last reprint of the current version of the book. So the second version of the book, the structure is the same, but there are some features that we're adding, and I'm changing some stuff about the way it's printed to make the process more manageable,
Yeah.
I'll say. But I'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can get them now at cortexmerch.com.
If you want a journal, get a journal right now. Like,
I remember how hard it was to get them printed the first time, and I'm basically restarting the process. So,
yeah, look, like, you know, we all know, like, oh, look, Cortex Journal is going through a chip transition, you know, so should I get the next one or should I get the now one? Get the now one. Like,
Get the now one.
I'm telling you that right now, man. You want a journal, you better buy it right now.
If you are using one and coming towards the end of it, or if you think you might be interested, you should buy one of these.
Yeah.
Because there will be more,
Yeah.
hopefully this year, but like who the knows?
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's difficult to deal with.
We're working on it, but you know, it's hard to make promises. It's hard to have estimates.
Considering the amount of these that we have sold and the amount of times that we've had them for sale, it would seem like maybe this is like a little thing that we work on. Like, I'm not kidding. I spend time every single day on this project, right? Every day I'm doing something on this project.
Yeah.
This is a very hard business to run.
Yeah, I mean, we said a year ago, like, oh, you can totally understand now how anybody who manufactures a physical product, it takes so much longer than you think, and this has been a real lesson in that of. Yep. You think, oh, why can't they just make another? It's like, oh no. When you start talking about supply chains and factories and all the rest of it,
sometimes it's not
so
as
hard.
Easy as just you wanting to do it.
Yeah,
right. But like, you know, basically the work that I'm putting in now is from having spent a lot of time learning over the last year and a bit, right? And so I feel like I'm in so much of a better place now than I was a year ago in trying to understand how to make this stuff work. And I feel like I'm taking what I've learned and putting it into this second edition, with the plan being of making this a more sustainable isn't the word, but like a constantly running product, which it hasn't been. Yeah,
the way I described it is you're trying to smooth out the variance. Right?
Yes.
Like we don't want big shipments occasionally. Like, we want to be able to figure out how to make this more of a regular thing. That's the main goal.
If somebody goes to cortexmerch.com on July 29th to buy a journal, I just want there to be one for them.
It's such
right?
a simple thing.
That's the plan. Because then, like, once we finally get that done, I can turn my attention to other projects that I've wanted to work on for 2 years, right?
Yes.
That are related to the Cortex brand company. But the entire output of the Cortex brand company is just soaked up by the theme system journal. One day.
So anyway, cortexmerch.com.
So I have been on a bit of a quest with real-time collaboration.
Okay.
So my mind has been taken up by note-taking, but I noticed that you'd put something in our document about note-taking as well.
Oh, okay. You know, listeners, I've just been through a big thing. Like, we're recording, I guess it's a little more than 2 weeks after I put up that whole, like, CGP Grey was wrong video, where I was partly like reevaluating my entire process of working.
Yeah, if I can give it a one-sentence summary, let's just say there was an error in the research process of a video, and then you made what I think is a very good video about your process, which people can find in the show notes. I'll put a link to it if they haven't seen it already.
So it's been quite a 2 weeks is what it's been, or it's 3 weeks now, actually. And so as part of like the internal post-mortem of that project, it's funny, I realized at one point, like, so I basically like I took a week off of all writing projects. I decided, okay, after this, what I can't do is I can't just, you know, that was an interesting, terrible experience, and like, let me just dive right into whatever the next video is going to be. I thought, like, okay, now I need to take some time off here. And now that the correction has been made and like all of that has been done, I need to like just sort of think about the actual process, what it's going to look like going forward, or be able to think without a time constraint on like, what might I want to change, or, you know, how might things be different? And it was funny. At some point I realized oh, I'm doing the thing that I think people think I spend all of my time doing, which is thinking about productivity, right? Like,
and trying new apps and systems.
yeah, and trying new apps and systems. And it's just like, it just struck me like 3 days into the project as a really funny thing.
This is the phenomenon. This is I'm going a long way around here, all right, to make a point.
No, go.
This is like the phenomenon that people talk about that causes like FOMO with Instagram influencers.
What do you mean?
Where you as a consumer only see what they show you. Right. So like what an influencer shows you. So it looks like they're traveling all the time because they just show you that they're traveling all the time.
Yeah.
Well, for me and you with productivity tools,
Yeah.
we always tell the Cortexans with every tool that we use.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean all we do is try new tools, right? So like every time we do it, we tell you about it. So it feels like we do it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a very funny selection effect that, I mean, it's easily got to be 99% of the things that I ever try or think about relating to productivity are discussed on the show, right?
But I'm not spending 99% of all time.
Yeah, it's just funny. And I think this is also, unlike the influencer effect, which is it's just a pure selection effect. I also just think like the topic of work is always endlessly interesting to me. Like I always, when I meet new people, I do always love to ask them like, oh, how do you work and how does it go? Because people are just so wildly different. Like one big slider that people end on different parts of is the like, how much do you need scaffolding to assist you with your work versus how much are you like Nike and you can just do it, right? And I think that there's often like a lot of confusion between those two groups, like not understanding each other. And so I think the people who are more on the just do it end of the spectrum then get like doubly frustrated with this person talks about productivity all the time, and it's just like there's like an additional layer here on top of the selection effect. But it also just like really made me smile when the thought popped into my head. I was like, oh, here I am. I'm reading a bunch of stuff on particularly note taking was what was my main focus. But I was like, I just realized like I am the picture right now of what people think I am. I'm like,
yep.
I've got 2 iPads in front of me. I'm taking like notes on one of those iPads. I've got a whole bunch of index cards spread across my kitchen table, and there's like pens, and it's like it was just a funny moment to become like self-aware. Like, oh, this is the thing.
You were like gray prime in that
yeah,
moment.
Exactly. It's like I am the idea in people's heads of what I am. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, well, this is silly. But yeah, I have to say, like, it was a really interesting. I'm sort of coming to the end of that time now and booting back up the writing project. So I'm not 100% settled on it. So this is still a little bit of like thoughts in progress on a thing. But one of the areas that I just sort of recognized as like what really needs rethinking is how do I take notes, right? Like, so when I'm working on a project, how do I organize the information related to that project?
Right.
And this is, we've always talked about it, the section of the show with the best show art of any of them, Evercore, right, is for years, I've used Evernote as the place that is like all of my notes. And so for all topics, anything that I think is interesting, like I just save web pages and PDFs and books, and like everything goes into Evernote, and like all of it is tagged with what is vaguely the topic that it's related to. And I've just like, I realized I've never really thought about that system since I first started doing it, 9 years ago or whatever. I've just never mentally reevaluated it.
What do you mean? I mean, we've spoken about you wanting to leave Evernote a bunch of times.
Okay, so here's what I mean by like not reevaluating it. So people are like, hey, have you heard the good news about Microsoft OneNote? I don't know if you've ever heard of a thing called DevonThink, but this exists. Like that's a totally different sort of question of, are you frustrated with Evernote? Are there problems with the app that you don't like? That kind of thing.
So that was always more the application not being suited to the process.
Yeah.
But what you weren't considering was the process. Like, how do I save a piece of information? Where is it stored? How is it tagged? What are these pieces of information?
Yeah, it's actually it's a little tricky to even articulate, but I guess what I would say is this is like on all of my projects, I would just have a huge pile of like here's all the primary sources related to whatever this topic is, so and I would work through those things and like I would write a script based on them. But so here, let me back up and talk about like the story of like Gray's history with the concept of notes, right? And taking notes, right? So I've always thought that like the way people think about notes in particularly like a school situation is that notes are totally worthless. Has always been my experience. Like I don't understand why this happens. I have a particularly weird situation with this because I literally never took notes in school because, as we found out later, I was not able to read the board. For some reason, I snuck through the entire eye testing system, and it was never noticed until I was well into high school that my vision was not good enough to actually see the board. And so I always had the experience of, yeah, you sit in school and, you listen to the teacher and then, you take the test based on like what you can remember or what's in the textbook.
What did you think the board was for then?
Okay. That's an excellent question, Mike. I don't want to get off on like an entire side tangent of this.
Yeah.
But I have in the past year really become increasingly fascinated with this concept of how people cannot notice the things in life that they don't notice, right? Or like how brains can be different and you're just completely unaware of something. And so what did I think the board was for is a fantastic question. And like the best answer I can give is, I guess I thought that this was like the teacher was working out things for themselves. Like,
Right.
when you're doing a math problem, you have to write it down.
It's their own reference material.
Yeah, like it was like the board was for the teacher, I guess, But I think the deeper truth of it was because I couldn't see the board, I just didn't consider it, right? Like it just wasn't really in my world. And this also happened to be a perfect storm of things because the way the New York state education system works is that everything is based around a series of like extremely automated, standardized tests. Like everything is multiple choice, even physics tests, like they're all multiple choice. As much as can be humanly automated is. And so as a student, you have a really clear target. There are these standardized tests. There's like books about how to pass them. All of the classes are oriented towards that. There's very little human subjectivity. And so the effect of like the particularities of individual teachers was greatly lessened under that system.
Right.
Which also means that like it doesn't matter so much if you're just preparing for the English Regents exam or the Math Regents exam. Like that's just a thing that you can do and no one cares. None of the teachers cared about your notebooks because like that was entirely like, hey kid, this is your problem. All we care about is how well you're doing on our like practice standardized tests. So that's also how on earth did I get through this without being noticed?
And also it like, I guess there's also elements of like random chance in it because you had to always be in every class far enough away from the board that you could never read it.
Okay, so I have the answer to this question, which is that at least in my high school, you were always allowed to pick your seats.
Yeah.
That first day of class, it was always my goal to sit in the back corner, right? One of the two back corners was like, that is my prime target. And then as close as I can get to that is what I was always aiming for.
Okay.
So there wasn't the random chance of like, oh, I'm in the front in some classes. I was never in the front.
It's like you sit in the front one day and it's like, oh, like all the formulations start passing in front of your eyes. Like, what is this incredible source of information?
Well, again, like I just think there's a way in which it's just not obvious to you if you don't know.
Sure.
The other thing for me was like I didn't know you could see people's faces right across the street. So it never occurred to me that humans can identify other humans by their face at greater distances.
Yeah, when I got glasses for the first time, I kind of equated it to like going from standard definition to high definition.
Right,
Like
right.
there were just signs that I didn't read, and I just figured you couldn't read them until you got a little bit closer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, my vision's not as bad as yours, clearly, but like it is, I can understand that a little bit, but there is just this. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, really, that like you just like, what board? what are you talking about?
Yeah, it just didn't exist in my world, and I think this is like just one of several kinds of examples where like you have no reason to notice a deficiency. My like other example of this is colorblindness. Like for people who are colorblind, once you have like a set of tests, this is a very easy thing to identify. But people can go a long time without knowing that they're colorblind, because it just like, how does this concept enter your mind if it's not like brought out in an A/B testing kind of situation? You can just think like, oh, other people are better at distinguishing these two things, but like it just doesn't really cross your mind, right? Like why would it? But yeah, so in high school I was like, oh, notes serve no purpose. And even after I got my glasses, I didn't like start taking notes then. I just thought like, oh, look at all the stuff the teacher's writing on the board.
Yeah.
It's how academically interesting is that? But like I'm not going to start this now.
Yeah.
And then when I went into college, as a general statement, like all of my physics professors provided class notes, because their whole thing was like, hey, what we're doing here is really hard. Pay attention and think it through. Like, don't waste your time writing notes in class. And so that ended up being like my first formal exposure to notes. Was like, don't bother. Like, we're going to give you notes. You're grown up now. We don't have to like do this pretend game.
Mm-hmm.
When I became a teacher myself, I attempted to replicate creating class notes for my students. And then I was immediately told by the school, like, you can't just give notes to your students. In the UK system, it's incredibly important that all of the students are like little tiny mimeograph machines. Like, they have to write down all of the things that you say in class word for word. And so my experience as a teacher was like, this whole note system is fraudulent. I have to make kids write down notes so that the school doesn't fire me, because the school cares about when the inspectors come. We have a bunch of notebooks to demonstrate that learning has occurred to the inspectors, because obviously, like, no one can learn anything if you haven't had like written documentation of that having occurred. So this is this like funny way of saying that like I have an entire lifetime of academic experience that told me taking notes is a kind of nonsensical busy work. And whenever like looking at productivity materials, like reading books or watching videos about like how people are productive, I was always really puzzled at the parts where people are like, oh, I read a book and I take these detailed notes on like what the book was, or like what are the important ideas. And I just always found that odd. Like, I don't understand what this is. And I thought it was a kind of, I don't know, like a kind of cargo culting. Like, oh, this is a thing that you learned in school about how people learn, but you're learning when you read the book and then you remember the things that are in the book. Like these notes aren't doing anything except they're like just a repeated behavior. So all of this brings to like, oh, what was I doing when I'm making videos? And the answer is like, oh, I'm reading tons of stuff and I'm remembering things. And the key skill is like, be able to remember where the information that you need is. Like, you can just like, okay, yeah, I read this thing in this article. Like, let me go back and check where that was. Or like, I'd read through books and I'd do highlights, and then I would import those highlights and surrounding information into Evernote. And it's like, okay, great. Now I've got a version of this book that instead of having to reread 300 pages, I've pulled out like, here are the 20 key pages that are related to whatever it is that I'm working on. So there's a way in which like I can reread this book in minutes, like not reread this book over the course of days, right? So like, this is kind of what Evernote was to me, was a really big pile of mostly primary sources with occasionally really brief, in quotes, notes at the top of these primary sources, which would be me just like very briefly perhaps summarizing like, oh, what was the important thing in this one? Or like, this is the one that talks about that piece of information. Like that's what Evernote was for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I don't think that when you're saying like the like notes part, like it's not notes, like that's note taking of sources, right? Like that, if I was doing what you were doing, that's what I would do.
Right. Okay. But so I almost wish we were recording this episode like 2 weeks from now because I think I could articulate some of this stuff better.
Well, that's what follow-up's for.
Yeah. But I think one of the key concepts I've had here is like, partly even writing little summaries to yourself is like not what Evernote is for. Evernote really should be like a library of primary sources only. There is a useful layer of what we can call notes that can exist on top of this. And that's what I've been exploring this past week is, okay, let me try to get out of my head all of this like academic cruft that has built up in my head about like what notes are and try to reapproach this topic.
So this would be,
yeah,
because I'm trying to follow here. The idea here is instead of attaching all of the notes to sources, you have notes about certain projects, certain topics, certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And if needed to, you can say like, oh, I got it from here. And then later, then you can go back to Evernote and you can find the source if you need it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's partly what I'm talking about. You know, because again, like one of the things where it's like, why do I think notes were sort of weird? So like I very rarely would make what people call like margin notes in books because it always seemed to me like, I don't know, it just seemed sort of pointless. Like I don't understand what it is. And I do think that there is something pointless about them.
Kind of hides the information.
Yeah. So this is exactly it. Like it strikes me as a sort of busy work of like, if you're writing this note, shouldn't that note be in the project that you're working on? Because otherwise, like, how are you ever going to access that again?
You have to read the book again.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is where like my script, my like quote script document often started with lots of like what would be margin notes in some sense, like just kind of got thrown into the script document. It's like, okay, well, this is the place where they go because I actually need to work with them. So like, I guess what I'll say is like one of the places where I found useful information to start and that got me kind of like thinking about it in the right way is, I almost hesitate to mention it because you know, again, like there's like the Notion Nation
represent.
There's the Rome heads. Like there's all these different like
Rome
groups.
Rovers, the Rome
Rovers,
Rome enthusiasts.
Yeah, something like that.
There's a better one in there somewhere. We can come up with that.
somewhere it is. Yeah. Oh. Rome Riders, like you let us know what it is.
What about romanticists?
That's terrible.
Okay.
I rate that 0 out of 1,000. That's awful.
All right. I mean, come on. You could have just gone 10.
I don't know. Maybe the romanticists really like that kind of terrible pun.
You just used it. It's not canon. This episode of Cortex is brought to you by Expressvpn. Expressvpn lets you access the internet as if you're from a different country. Your favorite streaming service will have different shows and movies available depending on where you are. And with Expressvpn, you can unlock thousands of new shows and movies from streaming libraries around the globe. There are hundreds of VPNs out there to choose from, but Expressvpn is my favorite because it's super fast. You can stream everything in HD quality with zero buffering, and Expressvpn is available on every device you own, from your phone to your laptop to your tablet, even your TV. ExpressVPN works with so many streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, and even more. And you can choose from almost 100 different countries. It's so simple to use. Just fire up the ExpressVPN app, just change which location you want to be coming from, hit connect, and then refresh the page, and the show or movie that you want to watch will magically appear. I've done this myself. I wanted to watch a show that was on Japanese Netflix, so I was able to use ExpressVPN, change my country, refresh the application, and I could watch it in HD, no lag, no buffering. It was absolutely fantastic. Right now, if you go to expressvpn.com/cortex, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/cortex. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for their support of this show and all of Relay FM.
So there's also a thing which is like trying to say like, oh, what are all these people up to? Like this has become this popular genre and figuring things out. And so anyway, like while wandering around the internet, I found another like really, really niche like sub community of this kind of thing, which I'm going to call the Zettel Zealots.
What is that?
So I came across this note-taking system, which is called Zettelkasten. And I refuse.
Can
I
you
refuse.
spell this?
Yeah, Zettlekasten. Zettelkasten.
Zettelkasten. Is this German? Yeah, it is.
It is German. And some of the Zettel zealots will insist that you should say it in German, like so it should be to Zettel, and it's like no,
like
pass.
I have this with Adina. It's like because of her surname, Niamtsu. It's,
yeah, that TS sound. Yeah,
she would say to me, it's the Z sound in pizza.
right. Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
Zettelkasten, I guess, something like that. And now every German just laughed at me, but.
Yeah. I know the sound. Like, I have the same thing with Dutch, where like there's sounds that I can hear in it, and like I can identify that sound, but I cannot reproduce it properly. So anyway, I'm gonna say Zettelkasten, and there's like this community of like Zettel zealots, but there's some interesting stuff in here, and like I don't want to get into the whole thing.
Is this an app? I can't. It doesn't look like it's an app.
Oh, Mike, you're gonna make me get into the whole thing. No,
it's
not
a system, right?
It's a system,
right?
It's a system, and the best way I can sort of explain it is like with anything, I'm not really interested in the system itself. It's like, oh, there was a person who invented the system and he wrote 1 million books because of it. And it's like, okay, great. Like all that lore, whatever. Like I'm here as like a value vampire to just extract whatever happens to be useful to me from this system of yours, right? And one of the key concepts that I've come across, which just like it was never clear in my mind, was this distinction between sources and notes. And so this is what I'm getting at with Evernote. Is like the moment you're writing anything in Evernote, like that's the wrong place for it. Evernote is where primary sources exist. And your script is the place where like the script is the project. That, that should be like the words that you're going to record into a microphone to turn into a video. But there does additionally exist a category of useful writing, which we can call notes. And one of the valuable ideas that I've extracted from the Zettelkasten system is it just fits in perfectly with stuff that I've done before of like, okay, you're thinking of notes like when you were in school and you're supposed to have like a 3-ring binder that tells you everything you ever wanted to never know about the English Civil War, right? Or whatever. It's like, no, forget that. Instead, what you want are like index cards. Think of it in a physical way. You've got a whole bunch of index cards, and each index card is a note, and each note should be a single idea about this topic. Or it should be a single summary of a primary source that exists elsewhere. And these are your notes on the topic. And coming across this, I felt like, oh, this is a huge relief, because it felt like two things. One, it reminded me of forever ago coming across Getting Things Done, where it was really important for someone to create this distinction of you have to-do lists, but there's two things here. There's projects and there's actions. And like a lot of your problem around to-do lists is that you're not drawing this distinction in your mind. And I think like I'd never had this just pointed out in a clear way of like primary sources and notes. And that notes exist as like atomic individual ideas. You're not trying to like recreate a whole book with your notes. You're trying to have like a stack of index cards with information about this topic that you can look at. And like this has been incredibly helpful. And it was also like, oh, this is perfect, because I realized like quite naturally, this is a thing that I've sort of done many times when I'm stuck with a project, which is, okay, stop looking at it on your computer, write out some of the basic ideas on index cards and like put them on a table in front of you and sort of think about it for a while. And like, as we've discussed many times, being able to work with paper is often quite clarifying when you're having problems in a digital system.
I think I'm struggling to understand a little bit.
Yes, please. Here's the thing. Please ask questions, because it's also helpful to me at this point to clarify, because like a lot of this stuff is still not perfectly settled in my mind, but I feel like I'm on the right track with a really important reevaluation of how the system works going forward that I haven't reevaluated in like a long time in this way.
All right, so I have two things I want to do. One is I think I've found a summary of the method on Wikipedia, but I'll leave that for a minute.
Yeah, no.
Right, I'll leave that for a minute because I might not need to get to this.
I'm going to tell you right now, don't read anything about it. It won't help you.
Right, so then I'm trying to understand then what this new system is for you and why Zettelkasten is involved at all. Because, all right, let's say you've read a research paper and there are things in that research paper that you want to remember. They're like notes that you want to take, right? Where do they go? Don't worry about the app or whatever, but like, do you have a separate place right now that you'll put quotes and thoughts in?
Okay, so yeah, right now, since I'm still in the playing around with it phase, but let's talk about the idea in the abstract, right? So as you're reading through some primary source, when something that's interesting comes along, one of the ideas is like, okay, by hand, write a summary of that on a little index card. And so it's like, okay, Liberty Island got bigger over time. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, that's an interesting piece of information. So like, Liberty Island is 3 times larger than it was 200 years ago, is like a note on this topic. And that can just live on an index card, because this is like the smallest condensation of a single idea. And so it's like, okay, that just goes. And as you keep reading through sources, it's like, oh, there was a Supreme Court case in 1800 about this dispute. Okay. So then you go and you read that Supreme Court case. You find out like some piece of information, and again, like you'll write down a discrete fact on this. It's like no documentation exists for why the island got bigger.
Like I'm not meaning to be a dick here, but this is like how I studied history, right? Which was just like I had a notebook, and what I did was write down facts, figures, and tiny pieces of information when I was in school, so I could pass the test. Right, and I say that as in such a way as like, I don't want to make fun of you not being able to see the board. Right.
No, like I mean, man, like don't get me wrong. Like this is that's why this is like such a weird topic for me, because it's like, and it's also just been, it's why I mentioned at the beginning, like, how can you not notice a thing that you're missing, right?
Yeah.
Is it really is like every time, I'd ever watch a video and someone's like, here's how I use, Rome, and I'm going to take a bunch of notes on a thing. I was just like, what are you even doing? Like, I don't understand why you feel the need to write all this stuff over again.
This is so fascinating to me. This is fascinating. I can't get my head around how someone who does what you do didn't really do this. I guess you were more like highlighting things, right? Because you always talk about the highlights and of the Kindle books, right?
Yeah, so highlighting in Kindle books and importing books into Kindle. Like this is also one of the reasons why I was always like, I cannot possibly leave Evernote. Because
of all the
the highlights and the ability to import books.
This is incredible. Like the scales are falling from my eyes. Right now, I get it way more. Like it wasn't just it always felt to me, and I'm sure now this is why people would always say, like, why did you move to OneNote? What's wrong with you? It wasn't the system. It was the actual like application. The data was there. What else were you gonna do? Like you couldn't move because you weren't moving notes. You were moving massive pieces of information that had notes in them.
Yeah.
Which were more like underlines of stuff rather than you seeing a thing and being like, right, I'll write that one down.
Yeah, and again, like the thing, it's so again, it's like there's just this way in which I've never really thought about what I was doing. But part of the reason why over the years I've talked about highlights is because of this key thing of like I need to be able to highlight the important things, because when I come back to whatever this is, I need to be able to reread this entire book in 20 minutes. Right. And that's what I need to be able to do. And that's what Evernote is doing.
Like that's like the wrong thing. What you needed is, I just got to go to the notes on this subject. I don't need to go back to the book.
The other thing that I would say is like what I was working with is a memory of primary sources. Like whenever I'm working on any project, it's like, okay, yeah, I've got a folder in Evernote, which is like, oh, here's all the primary sources about whatever this topic is. But I'm also able to remember very well, like, oh, I read this thing in that thing. Like, let me go back and just double check whatever these numbers are.
Right, but this is one of those false systems because you're relying on your memory.
Oh, I know, right? Like
more than you needed to. Because if you're having to remember where to go to find the information, the system's wrong.
Yeah.
Because what you need is just the one place that all the information is on one topic, rather than here's a folder of 20 research papers. All I have to do is remember which research paper to go to.
Right, yeah. Yeah. And it's also a way in which, like,
man,
it's just very interesting, like you see how you work, and I've just never thought about it. And I've been doing this for years and just kind of build it up.
I cannot believe it's taken us 6 years nearly to get to this. Like, because this is like when, obviously a big thing, but like I'm sure you can see how like it's fundamental, right? Like this part of your system, whether it's the old way or the new way, is like a fundamental part of the way that your research is done. Mm-hmm. And just for some reason, we have never understood with each other that this was a thing, right? Like I had always just taken as read what you were doing. Mm-hmm. And had never really thought that you didn't like. It's like for me, right? I would have a note. Like, let's imagine that I was making a video about the history of Nintendo. I would have a note that was like the history of Nintendo. Mm-hmm. And in that note would have subheadings with like, here's something about the NES, here's something about the SNES, and like all of the little pieces of information that I would find out from watching videos, reading articles, and I would just bring them in. Mm-hmm. That's my system. But if I was working on your system, my assumption would be I would save all of that stuff to a place and make inline notes in separate places about those sources. So if I was reading an article, I would make notes on the article, or if I was reading a video, maybe like notes in a comment, like in the video, maybe I'd save a link to it in Evernote or whatever. Mm. But then when it comes for me to then write the script, I have to be like, all right, so now I need to go back and, I know there was something in the NES and this one. But in the system that I always have had, all of the NES stuff would be in one place, right? Like I feel like if I'm following correctly, that's kind of like the difference. Because you were saying about taking a quote-unquote index card and putting in a piece of information on it, right? Mm-hmm. What are these index cards in a digital system?
Well, okay, so here's also part of the reason why, like, I'm like, what are people doing with these notes? I don't understand. Mm-hmm. Is because even when you start talking about like, I'm gonna write an outline. We're talking about here's an A4 piece of paper and it's going to be filled with information about Nintendo. They were founded in what is it? It's always like 1897 or something. It's great. They were a playing card company in 1897. Yep. Whatever. That kind of stuff. That always feels to me like, why aren't you just writing a script? If you're doing this, like what is this thing that you're even doing here? Or the reverse of it is, what is this ridiculous outline? Like, you may put a timeline, like have a list of dates on a piece of paper with just the basic information about what happened when. All of this extra stuff is superfluous because you can just like quickly reread the book on Nintendo and like revisit the primary source and like make sure that you have everything correct. Like
it's very time intensive.
I think it's less so when you realize, like, again, why were some of the features of Evernote really important to me? And like one of them is when you're highlighting PDF documents, Evernote has an amazing feature, which even in a PDF will like pull all of those highlights right to the front.
Well, and also as well, I assume the OCR is very helpful.
Yeah, the OCR is incredibly helpful. Yeah, for sure.
Because if you are thinking to yourself, I need every piece of information about this part, I know I've read it in some articles, you could just search for it.
Yeah. It's just very interesting. And having made these videos and have experts look them over, like I have a really great track record of the experts being like, yeah, this script is totally fine. Right? It's like, oh, great, system works. Like there's no indication of like you need any change with this.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like just thinking about all of this, like, so one of the key things about the Zettelkasten, which really resonates with me, is I hate the concept of like notes on a single piece of paper. It's also why like the app that I use for writing my scripts is Ulysses, because one of the key features of Ulysses is they're like, no, we don't have a piece of paper that you're writing a script on. They call them sheets, I think, but it's the same thing where it's like pages can be arbitrarily long. They can break at any point. They can have page breaks, and you can have little sections, right? And so you can move the little sections around all the time. And I'm fairly sure that like no one uses Ulysses the way I do, where borderline, every paragraph or two is broken up as a completely different little section, because I'm very often like rearranging these things. So this is why the concept of like, you want to be able to move the notes around is really helpful to me, because very quickly in a project, it becomes super clear, like, oh, I don't care about this part. But if I've like written it on a piece of paper, or it's like a heading on an outline, it's sort of like stuck in place and you have to deal with it, right? Whereas, if I'm working on Who Owns the Statue of Liberty, and what I have is like a stack of, oh, here's 40 index cards of like your notes on this topic. There's a way in which like you can sort them or arrange them in such a way that it makes more sense. Like, okay, these relate to each other.
Right.
This I don't care about at all, and I can like move this around.
But when you're saying note, right, like this is the nomenclature I really want to make sure I'm getting correct. You mean like a singular piece of information.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because I think a lot of people, including me, think of a note as this page.
Yeah. So this is kind of why, like, when I was looking around and reading stuff, like I immediately sort of gravitated towards Zettelkasten, because this is one of the key concepts. Like they talk about notes as being atomic, right? So it's like each note is an atomic piece of information. You shouldn't be able to reduce it.
Can I read from Wikipedia now? Please let me read from Wikipedia. I think it will help. I genuinely do.
Okay, go ahead.
A Zettelkasten consists of many individual notes with ideas and other short pieces of information that are taken down as they occur or are acquired. The notes are numbered hierarchically so that new notes may be inserted at the appropriate place and contain metadata to allow the note taker to associate the notes with each other. For example, notes may contain tags that describe key aspects of the note, and they may reference other notes. The numbering, metadata, format, and structure of the notes is subject to variation depending on the specific method employed. I think that helps, because it's the idea, at least, that I think I'm following, is that the reason this system seemed to meet with you is that you've got like this little piece of information, and they're put into a system, but they are free to be moved around.
Yes.
But they are in like a hierarchy, or they are associated with each other, but not in such a way of like, here is an outline.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Like one of the key things, and this again is where like my feelings about notes and outlines. So I was like, this seems like nonsense. Before you write a paper, create an outline of the paper. Like, what are you going to write in each of these sections? I was like, that is a bunch of nonsense. That's saying before you write the paper, you need to know what the paper is about. It's like, well, how am I supposed to do that before I write it? It's like the outline's the hard part, asshole. Like this is not the easy part to get you started. Like it's, I always found that stuff just really frustrating. And again, is why with so many of like the way this stuff is taught in school, it just seemed to me like, what is this charade everyone is playing? Like, I don't understand. Oh, I can write an outline before I know all the things about the topic. Exactly how am I supposed to do that? This is also why like this system of like little notes that are just individual pieces of information means it doesn't matter what order you come across these pieces of information, right? Like writing and research are nonlinear processes. And by having individual atomic notes, they can be created and found in any order. It doesn't matter. One of the other things that I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but since I'm still in this intermediate stage, but I suspect it's going to be helpful, is I have a strong feeling that this will help also more clearly define when am I writing versus when am I researching.
Mm-hmm.
Right now in the video creation process, and for always, like those two phases have been very difficult to even distinguish from each other quite often. And so I suspect like, I'll be able to draw a greater distinction between those two, and that might be useful. Like even in my own time tracking system, in theory, I've always had two timers, one which is called like writing and one which is called research. But I'm very aware that I treat those two as totally indistinguishable from each other. Like very often I'm starting the research timer and then it's like, oh, I've basically spent all this time writing or vice versa. And it's like, who cares? This is all the same sort of non-linear, deeply interconnected process.
It's not like when you write, you no longer refer to the material.
Yeah. So, yeah. And again, like on my computer screen, like this is also why, like whenever I'm writing, I would almost always have Evernote open on the side. And it's like, oh yeah, here's that report that dude wrote about tumbleweeds 100 years ago. Like I want to have that on screen while I'm writing the section about tumbleweeds, that kind of thing. But it also does make it like a bit more burdensome that I'm always like 100% looking at the primary sources.
Right. When really what you need is this group of atomic notes.
Yeah.
And then you can pick out the ones that are most necessary for the current part of the script that you're writing.
Yeah, it's like a layer of information that exists between the script and the primary sources. Whereas I'm totally aware that I keep describing. I mean, I'm sorry, listeners. I'm sure this must be infuriating as I explain to you like what you learned in grade school is a useful skill, right? It's like
it is. This is very surreal to be talking about, like because it's. But I guess it's kind of fascinating because it's like, how would you rediscover this type of note taking today?
Mm-hmm.
So this new grade system, does it only include text?
What do you mean?
Well, like if you had an image.
Oh, yeah. So again, since I'm just playing around and it's still very fluid, I've been largely working on actual paper because I think that's always the best way to think about something.
Yeah.
But I have found one of these apps to do this kind of thing, and it's an app called Obsidian. It's funny. It's actually someone's. It's a very small team, and it's their quarantine project. Like it's a thing that they've been working on. So it's still pretty early.
Ooh.
What was that sound?
This looks complicated.
Okay, so the reason this caught my attention and is also
it supports LaTeX.
Okay, right. Okay, like let me get there, Myke.
You've been found out.
So this is like a note app, and I would say this is very much in the like Notion Rome family. This is another version of like different people are trying to approach this sort of concept of these interconnected webs of information.
This looks so complicated.
Yeah, but here's the thing. A thing finally clicked for me, which was, last time we were talking about how like, I was working in Notion and I was just trying to type and/or, and then like when I hit / a whole world of opportunities opened up to me. And it's like, oh my God, I don't need to insert a Kanban board in the middle of this sentence, but thanks guys, right? I think for also reasons which may be much more clear now, I'd also largely just totally dismissed the very notion of apps like Notion and Rome. I was like, this is just nonsense. This is just academic busy work for people who don't really need it. So it just so happens like working with Obsidian and just playing around with it and seeing like, okay, what's the deal? Of all of these various notes, like the Zettel heads seem to really like this one in particular. So I was like, oh, let me just play around with it. And a thing finally clicked in my head, which is I realized, oh, okay. What all of these notes systems are doing is very similar to the thing that I used to use in college, which was org mode on Emacs. And it's the same concept of like when you're typing, at any point you can link to something else or insert different kinds of information. And something about like the graphical user interface of a thing like Notion makes it to me feel like really cumbersome and absurd. But when I think about it as, yeah, but you can do this whole thing just with an extremely large number of text files on your computer. There's a way in which like, oh, it feels much more simple to me. And I realized like, yes, when I used to use org mode on Emacs, like that's what this thing was. You can like link to any other text file, or you can quickly include some to-dos. You can include your LaTeX formatting if you want to. You can insert a calendar, but it's all done via text files. And that's the thing that Obsidian is doing. It's similar to Rome. It's similar to Notion. The key difference is that they're just doing it entirely through Markdown files on your local drive. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. I get it. I've been using Markdown to write my scripts for forever. So this is like no burden whatsoever to then also do a bunch of notes in Markdown. And it means that like the transition between those two is ridiculously simple if I want information to go one way or the other. But so this is like a digital version of doing the index cards. And this is where like, oh yeah, if you have an image that you want to use, like you can include it in just the way Markdown formats including images. But ultimately it's all just, here's 300, .md files on your hard drive that are just text files. And if you type double brackets, you can link from one to another, which is like the exact same thing that Rome does. Like if you're typing in Rome, you can open up 2 double brackets and you can link to any other one of the notes anywhere in your system. So does that answer your question of what happens if you have a picture?
Kind of. I'm really lost looking at this Obsidian app.
I would not recommend Obsidian for you, Myke.
No, because I don't really understand. Like, so you're creating. Where are you making notes?
Well, again, for me, I'm still doing this almost entirely with paper as I'm figuring out what's useful.
Okay.
Right. I have played around with Obsidian. But again, like just like we talk about when people are figuring out their to-do systems, like you don't want to prematurely optimize for the digital version because you're going to get too distracted by the features or lack of features of whatever digital tool. It's the same thing here. Like I just wanted to play around with Obsidian to see like, let me understand the concept of what this is in a digital form, which is you can have virtual index cards with virtual strings connecting related ones together. It's like, okay, cool. I understand that. And that also helped me understand this is very much like, the reason I think you're feeling overwhelmed looking at it is it's very Linuxy, which is what made me think like, oh yeah, this is just like org mode from 1,000 years ago. So you can have this digital version, but it's just like the basic idea is for any project, you can have notes that are just individual pieces of information. Those pieces of information, because they're on index cards, are not constrained by your preconception of either like what is the hierarchy or what is the order of these notes. That can come out of it later when you realize, oh, these 3 pieces of information are related, or like these 2 pieces of information, I thought they were interesting and important at the start, but it turns out that they're actually irrelevant, so I can put them at the back of the list. It's really just about the reordering layer. And again, I think why this feels like it's a useful step for me is because it feels like this pre-script layer where it's much easier to think about some of the information related to a topic without, one, reviewing the primary sources, even in their much compressed form, or 2, writing the script where there's also this additional layer of what is the style in which I'm saying this information, right? Because the script is not just a recitation of facts, right? No one would watch the videos if I was just like, here, let me tell you all the facts about the situation. That has a whole other, like, what is the style? How is this being told? Like, what are the visuals going to be? Like, that's an additional thing that I have to think about when doing that. So the notes layer feels like information organization without the burden of style and without the weight of the primary source, right? That's the way I think this will work going forward.
I feel like Rome is a good option for you from what I know about it.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Because it is all about like singular pieces of information that can very easily link together. And from what I know of Rome, it is available on the web, on all devices, and my understanding is they are making apps for all platforms. My concern would be with an app like Obsidian is like Mac only, which I don't know if that's the right method.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like no iOS app for Obsidian is the hugest downside.
Yeah.
100%. But again, this is why like I'm not really invested in what is the digital tool at this stage.
Yeah, I want to come back to that though. Like I really do. But
But like the thing is, I wanted to just play around with it because there is a way in which it can be briefly clarifying about like what do people mean when they're talking about linking nodes. Oh, okay.
Yes, I think that you had to start looking at some of these things like Notion, Rome, Obsidian for you to be able to clarify the basic system.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can see that of like, all right, you're like, all right, okay, so I'm not wild here. It is a valid like way that people collect information, right?
Yeah.
And now you can go back to doing what you're doing now of like making sure that this basic structure makes sense to you. This has been a trip. Wow.
Well,
You think you know someone.
Well, I mean, again, this is where I really mean this thing of like my other drumbeat from being just a person who makes things on the internet is the deep realization that human communication is much harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is that human brains are much more different than people think they are, but they're also different in extremely subtle and hard to notice ways. And this can be one of these sorts of things where it's just like something that seems obvious to everyone can be non-obvious for someone else, or just because the way like one person's brain works, like a thing that works for everyone doesn't work for them.
Well, like we have been talking about notes apps for so many years, but never had we realized that we were doing this process in such vastly different ways.
Yeah. It casts back on the, like, every time you're talking about Evernote or note-taking apps, like, you realize, like, oh, there's something else here, right, that makes this conversation make a lot more sense, which is Gray thinks notes are like a Potemkin village of knowledge that schools require students create for inspectors and have no intrinsic value whatsoever. And grown-ups who make notes are just repeating the behaviors from their childhood without understanding why they're doing it. Right?
Just because you couldn't see the board.
I do still wonder, like, how on earth I made it so long without being able to see the board.
Or realize it. Like, that's the funny part to me, right? Like, it never came up. It just never came up.
I do wonder sometimes because I think perhaps if I'm trying to recreate, like, how did this situation even begin in the first place? I do know, like, one of the most important gifts that my parents ever gave to me was when I was in middle school. They gave me this, like, course on how to memorize stuff. And I know we've talked about this sometimes. And, like, I remember in middle school just really devouring this set of tricks of how to remember things. And I've always just been aware of how that one thing got me through high school and college is like, here's how to memorize things. And so I also just wonder is that a contributing factor to how I was able to get by with no one noticing I couldn't read the board, is because I was like, oh yeah, no, I've got this hack for the school system that just lets me pass these standardized tests.
This episode of Cortex is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace. They will let you easily create a website for your next idea with a unique domain name, award-winning templates, and more. No matter what type of website you want to build to Squarespace, they have the tools for it. They are an all-in-one platform that will let you build a blog or a portfolio or an online store, a site for an event, a site for your business. It doesn't matter what type of website you want to make, they have the tools. There's nothing to install or patch or upgrade. They have all of that stuff covered, and they back it up with award-winning 24/7 customer support. So if you need any help, Squarespace have a dedicated team of knowledgeable people on hand to help you get your stuff done. Everything needs a website these days, and Squarespace is the best place to start. You don't have to learn how to code. You don't have to learn how to build it from scratch. You can take advantage of their powerful and beautiful tools to help you build that website. They can also let you easily grab a unique domain name so you can give that website the domain that it deserves. And all of their templates are so beautiful, they're award-winning to help you show off your great ideas. I have been using Squarespace for, I think, over 10 years now, and I have so many projects that I've started on Squarespace, and I'm going to continue to do it because it's so cool, so easy, and I love the way it works. You can sign up for a trial today with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/Cortex. Then when you want to launch your site to the world, their plans start at just $12 a month, but you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain and show your support for this show by using the offer code Cortex at checkout. Once again, that's squarespace.com/Cortex and the code Cortex for 10% off your first purchase. A thanks to Squarespace for their continued support of Cortex and Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website. So do you remember last time we were talking about real-time collaboration applications?
You were looking for alternatives to Google Docs. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, because we were upset about no dark mode, and then I said to you, all right, let's try out Word. Look out for an invitation from me.
Oh, yeah. I haven't opened my email since then, but I assume that invitation never came.
It never got sent.
Okay.
Because Word didn't pass the initial testing for me.
Okay.
Basically, I spent a couple of days trying out lots of different applications. You know, like I tried Word, I tried Pages, I tried like Notion for something like this, I tried Apple Notes. Effectively, the problem is none of them are as instant as Google Docs. And, you know, like I was just doing some simple testing with like, I would have Word open on my iPad and Word open on my Mac in the Mac app or in the web browser. And the issue would be that it would update the information, but not immediately. It would kind of like, you could basically watch the system do it. Like you would start typing a bunch of stuff, you would stop, you would see like saving, and then a couple of seconds later it would appear in the other place.
Right.
And like, that is not what I want. And then, so I was doing these tests in between the time of like us recording and releasing the episode. And honestly, by the time we'd released the episode, I realized that both Word, Pages, and everything else, none of them were as good as Google Docs. Then I started hearing from all the Cortexans who were like, please don't use Word. I have lost so much work through their collaboration system because it's conflicts, right? Like this is the thing that we were talking about. It's like, it's conflicts. Also, like, you know, there were people that were saying to me like, oh, Word has a dark mode as well, but it doesn't have a dark mode. Like the UI goes dark, but the page is still white. And then there were people that would tell me, oh, all you have to do is change the page to a black background and the text to white. No, that's not a dark mode. That's not a dark mode, right?
Yeah.
Like that's you making changes that you'll eventually like when you're on a system that has light mode, and then it won't make any sense because the page is black.
Yeah, I hate those pseudo dark modes so much.
Yep.
I was really pumped because Apple recently released a dark mode for Numbers, their spreadsheet program that I use so much. I was like, oh, finally, like dark mode for spreadsheets. No, the spreadsheets are just as white as they ever were.
Yeah, it's just all the UI chrome that's dark, which just that's not, you know, it's like it's not helpful. Like email apps are fine, you know, like it just inverts the text color, but it's not like everybody's getting emails that are just white text, right? Like, that's no good. So basically, there's a long version of this, but I don't think it's worth necessarily going into at this point. The short version is I've come to conclude that real-time collaboration for me is more important than the native OS features that I want.
Right.
Because the most important thing that goes into these documents is the text, and the text has to be correct for everyone. And if it isn't, then what was the point in even starting the document in the first place? Like if real-time collaboration was not as important, like if all I wanted was just to have like the most native features, I'd probably just use Apple Notes for everything. Right? Like that's the decision I kind of come to is like, that's an application that's always going to be up to date with the system. It has good hooks in with the system and I love it. I use it for so much stuff. But the problem is, like, you have to wait for people's stuff to get synced in. And then the other issue I was finding is that all of the new pieces of software that people are creating, like in the vein of a Google Docs, like a kind of a web-based solution, they want to be everything. They want to be docs and sheets and chat and tasks and everything and everything and everything and everything.
Right.
And that's also not what I want. Like, I want a focused product. So I think I'm basically back in the place that I end up being once every year or two. Google Docs is the best at what Google Docs does.
Yeah.
And I just have to hope that Google will update it to be what I want it to be.
I'm sorry that your journey into real-time collaboration apps was less of a march and more of just a circle right back to where you started.
In like 2 days. It really didn't.
At least it was
long.
a short circle then. It wasn't a
That's
long
true.
circle.
That's true. Like I didn't have to do a lot of work to come to this decision, but I've come to really rely and value what Google Docs does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the best at what it does fundamentally. So I mentioned that now was a busy time for me, right? Like I've got a lot going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
The big project that I have on my horizon is the Podcastathon 2.
Oh, Podcastathon 2.
Yep.
Electric Boogaloo.
Indeed. Listeners may remember that last year we raised a ton of money. It was an incredible thing for St. Jude Children's Cancer Research Hospital. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this on our next episode. But we are fundraising again, starting now and throughout September. If you go to stjude.org/relay, you can give money there. It would be incredible for you to support the cause. We had such an incredible showing last year. We raised over $300,000, which was just absolutely unbelievable. Blew us all away. And we want to do it again. We want to raise that money again because, it's difficult, right? Everything's difficult for everyone right now. But that doesn't mean that this is the thing that we also can't continue to think about, and we should. Like, St. Jude is such an incredible place. Like, they do such incredible work. The treatments that have been invented at St. Jude, they've helped push the child cancer survival rate from 20% to more than 80% in its 50 years of being around.
Mm-hmm.
And so supporting this charity, like their mission is to make sure that no child dies from cancer. And I think they can do that, right? Like they've done such incredible things over 50 years. We want to continue to support their work. So if you go to stjude.org/relay, you can donate. Whatever you can will go a long way to helping this wonderful institution and the children that they take care of. And this isn't a charity that is just an American charity. They help people from all over the world, and the research from St. Jude has helped with medicine worldwide. So it is a really, really incredible place that does incredible things. So I want to talk more in detail about St. Jude on our next episode, because will be in September, and that is when Childhood Cancer Awareness Month is. But also in September is Podcastathon 2. It's going to be on September 18th from 2 to 8 p.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/relayfm. Again, I will talk about that more. I will remind everybody in our next episode about that. But the big thing that's taking up my time right now is that this is an all-remote Podcastathon.
You're not all getting together in
Memphis?
Tennessee again?
No, not happening. It's like last year we did everything in Memphis, Tennessee. That at the St. Jude campus, they have these incredible production facilities there. And I mean, I can't be there. Right. So currently at the moment, big project is getting Mega Studio set for this event.
Oh, right. You're going to need filming as well, right? Like,
it's all video.
You want to look good on camera.
Mm-hmm. So I have my one-person production crew of Adina right now, and we are making it happen. We're setting up sets. We're getting some lights. We're getting tripods. And there's a lot going on, and it's a big project for everyone right now, because as well as coming up with the content that we want to put into the event, it's like just the basics. Like when we started the planning for Podcastathon 2, it was like, all right, how can we make this bigger and better and focus on the content? So we started doing that, and now we have the sub-project of, okay, now we need to rework all the logistics as well. So
right.
So it's a bigger project. I mean, I'm really pleased this is the second one we've done, because if it was the first one, it would have been infinitely harder, because now we've been able to learn from last year. And, I genuinely think that the remoteness of it is not going to affect it. Like, the only difference is me and Steven are not in the same place, because
Yeah.
every guest we had last year, well, not every, but many of the guests we had last year were remote guests.
Yeah, it's really lucky that you were able to do it with Steven in person the first time. Like, I think that makes a huge difference for trying to do it all remote the second time, for sure.
Yeah, so we've learned from it, and we have an incredible team at St. Jude and Ulsac to help us put it on. Like, they've given us access to lots of incredible resources. So I'm really excited about it, but I'm also like super nervous about it, because it's a big job, like, for us to get this studio ready for that. Like, it was never made for that. Right. So like, we're currently setting up sets effectively, like locations, like fixed locations in the studio.
Wait, what do you mean, like sets and locations? Like, are you going to transition to, this is Myke by the fireside kind of set? Like,
pretty
is that
much,
what you mean?
yes. So we're going to have
great.
3 locations in the studio. Like, one is like a relaxed location.
Oh.
One is a behind the desk location, and one is a secret location that I won't reveal just yet.
Okay.
Because we're setting up something which is in scope, maybe a little more than we should do, but if we are able to execute it, and I believe that we will be incredibly fun. So it's a big project, and like, I'm super happy that I have Adina's time for this. Like, she's basically pushing everything to the side to do this, because there's no way I could do this on my own. Like, even just like getting the basic equipment that we need is a huge task, because like, you try and find a good light right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have those fancy, like, I don't know what they're called, the things that you use to bounce the light off of, so you can look, really great on,
I'm not
camera?
I don't think I'm going to that level.
The bounce shields. I don't know.
Yeah, bounce shields. That's what they call it in the biz. Like, just stuff like and it's a great product, like the Elgato key light. All the streamers use these lights.
Okay.
They're fantastic. I've been able to get a couple of them.
Is this more of your RGB nonsense? Is that what you're talking about here?
It's just a pure light. There's no RGB on this one, but it's something that all the game streamers use. But yeah, it's like, this is an interesting task to tackle, because this is not my world. But it's something that we are getting a handle of during the fundraising process between now and September 18th. Like, we're raising money all through September, but obviously we want to have a lead up to the podcastathon. Like, we're going to be doing other Twitch streams, and this is all like testing of the setups, right?
Okay.
So we can make sure that like we have the basics ready before we have to commit 8 hours,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's not when you want to find out how difficult it is to switch between sets, is when you're trying to do something live for 8 hours. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, and so it's even like one thing where I've already realized, like, oh, okay, I found a great tripod. I need 2 of these. Right. And so like, I've got this like cart we bought from IKEA that has like a small tripod on it, the laptop that I'm going to be using, the light and gear, right, that I need because then basically we're moving this cart around to the different parts of the studio, right? So it's all in a fixed location. But what I've learned is for 2 of the locations, it will be better if I can just pop the camera off and put it onto a tripod, which is on the ground rather than on the cart. So like, this is the benefit of doing these smaller tests, of trying to work out what this environment will be good for. And there's like 2 things which is like benefits. One, I'm pleased we didn't have this place entirely furnished, because we would not have the space to do what we want to do.
Right. Yeah. You didn't know that, surprise, you need to build 3 filming sets in Mega Studio.
Yep. And 2, it's helping us accelerate the furnishing process, because there's stuff that we need for this. So yeah, this is a very interesting task to undertake, but I'm very excited about it, and I couldn't find a better cause to do it for. So, Core Texans, do us proud. Go to stjude.org/relay and donate now. Get ready for the podcastathon, and I'll be talking about it a little bit more next time. So, as is usual for us, I had like a million more things that I wanted to talk about today. That we're going to have to push to a later episode, because I was not expecting what was your, quote, mini topic in the episode of reassessing your note-taking to be an absolute fundamental rebuild of what it takes to make a note.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to totally blow your plans. Like, I thought that might be a nice pre-show thing.
Hey, look, as I've said many times, there's two great things about us having more. Like, I have work already done for next time, and two, it gives us stuff to talk about in more text as well.
Yes, that's true.
But before we go today, it's August. And around these parts, August means text adventures.
Text adventure time.
And we have another one. So on August 29th, the upgrade Cortex crossover text adventure for this year will be published for Relay FM members. All Relay FM members get access to this. So if you subscribe to Mortex or you subscribe to another show, there is a feed called Relay FM Crossover, which is where all of the bonus content is posted. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. So if you're a member and you don't have the crossover feed, you can just click that and it will take you where you need to go to sign up for it. But this is a great time, if you're not a Relay FM member, to try out Mortex. Because if you go to getmortex.com, you can sign up for $5 a month, and you will get more text, and you will also get the crossover feed that includes the text adventure special, so you can give it a go and see what you're missing out by not getting more text. There's going to be a trailer at the end of this episode, so you can hear the theme of this year's text adventure, so I'll play that for you. If you're not a member, you need to become one to get access to this. Go to getmoretext.com. You can sign up. You'll be able to get the Mortex feed and the crossover feed that will include the text adventure for you. And don't forget, Mortex is longer, ad-free episodes of Cortex. So go check it out right now. Getmoretext.com.
Getmoretext.com.
Myke, Gray, welcome to Z Wars.
Oh no, it's a zombie. Oh no.
You're at the hospital entrance. You're outside the hospital where your sister was admitted 9 weeks ago. You may enter to the north. The hospital grounds continue east.
Okay, I've already got to redo my map. Okay, wait a second.
Didn't last very long.
You read the poorly spelled email you received this morning from your sister. Help. Zombie. Apocalypse. XOXO, Francis.
Looks like you're right, Myke. It's zombie time. The only real piece of information that we need is what kind of zombies are we dealing with here? Are they like zombies, or are they 28 days later zombies? If they're zombies aren't that big of a problem. I'm hoping it's zombies.
You have a fire extinguisher.
If we have to use this fire extinguisher to extinguish a fire, I'm going to be very disappointed.
It turns out this is just a lesson in fire safety, this whole adventure.
I guess typical style, we check this floor, right? Like, let's not leave the floor.
Myke, you and I, we're like a SWAT team here. We're going to cover our corners. We're going to take it floor by floor.
With our fire extinguisher, just like a good SWAT team.
The theater is filled with the shuffling bodies of zombified patients and staff members. There are too many zombies here to fight. Upon seeing you, they become agitated and start to close in.
Get out. Close the door.
Close the door. Don't dead. Open inside.
Reference acknowledged. Zombies begin to enter the kitchen.
We're f***ing this round.
We shouldn't have opened that door, huh?
The zombies attack you and bite you and kill you and you die. The end.
All right, okay. Fine.
You open the heavy door and find a chef.
Say hello.
She says, "You didn't eat anything, did you? The chief of staff told me to add vitamin Z to the meatloaf. After that, everything just went to hell."
No. I'm going to turn the dial, okay?
No, but what I'm saying is that we need to do that right now.
You have no sense of exploration, Myke.
You guys may not remember the past text adventures, but we've had this conversation before.
Set dial to high.
The machine hums and the zombie thrashes around. But something goes wrong. The machine starts to smoke and the electrodes catch fire. The zombie's eyes burst from their sockets and the power goes out.
Are we in darkness
I
now?
can't see anything. It's dark.
Well, I guess this is where we use the bullet on ourselves and start over.
Or you could just, load your save game. You manage to escape Z-Ward with your life, but you'll never forgive yourself for the loss of your sister. The end. Okay. Boo!
Okay, all right. Reload save slot 2.
I think that's the most judged we've been by Skeletron.
If you want this text adventure, it's available for all Relay FM members in the crossover feed. You can become a member today at getmoretext.com.
This is the world's most ambitious text adventure crossover event.
Yes.
It's not that ambitious, but still.